time out of your schedule to attend. As Mike mentioned, my name is Brett Mewett. I'm a senior manufacturing consultant for Central Software. I also a part-time studies instructor at BCIT, teaching the APICS CPIM body of knowledge, and I'm listed as a master instructor, level instructor there. So one of the reasons why I bring that point up about APICS and the body of knowledge there is some of the slides I'm going to share with you today are actually from the APICS curriculum. Got their permission to be able to use the slides and present it, and be able to share this with you. So I assume, Mike, you can hear me, and if so, everybody else can hear me?
Absolutely. Sorry, I was muted.
Okay, no worries, no worries. Okay, so excuse me, our first slide that we're going to take a look at here really is, I want to focus on, it says, of course, business and operations strategy alignment. The first thing that I want to really, just before we even populate this with any more data, is taking a look at the triangle that we have there, or the pyramid. In teaching the APICS body of knowledge, you use the pyramid a lot for describing a hierarchy of planning, and we're really talking about the highest level of planning at this particular point. One of the things you'll notice is, there's multiple levels, and we need to come and understand that as we go through the various levels, that each level, the output of one level needs to equal the input of the subsequent level. In turn, they're going to do things with that data, make decisions and so forth, and then that in turn has to, their output has to be the same input into the next level, and so forth. And the term that we use for that is, particularly on the I guess tactical planning side of things, is we disaggregate it. And what I mean by that is when we look at the top level there, we're looking at the business strategy, and we're going to focus in on that quite a bit this afternoon in our discussion. And it's at the top of the mountain, so to speak. So at the top of the mountain, you can see as far into the distance as possible. That being said, while you can see a long way away, your horizon is further away. Your level of detail is definitely less, and that's okay, because we want to look at the aggregate data that we have at this point. When we're talking about a business strategy for your organization, we're talking usually the language that we speak is going to be dollars. So we're going to do $1 million a month next year, or we're going to be doing $1 million a month 5 years from now. And we talk about that. Now, what will we actually sell? What services will we actually provide? That will be defined. And that's where this alignment from one level to the next is so critical. Now, as we go through that, once we've determined what that strategy is, then the next level is we're going to get into the operations strategy, which is, what are the decisions that we're going to make that will help us to achieve the strategic goals that have been put into place. If they are not aligned, then we're never going to meet or attain the strategy that we've defined for our organization, because our team is going to be looking in one direction, while we, if we're the CEO or the president of the company, with our business strategy, we're thinking, we're heading in that direction. So there has to be an alignment there. And as we get into the operations strategy, we're going to find that what we do is we're starting to disaggregate that down. We're getting into a little bit more detail now. So we're taking the monthly numbers that our strategy is telling us to achieve, and we're saying, okay, now here's how we're going to achieve that. We're going to do X number of dollars in this category or product family, X number in this product family, total those up, and that equals the plan that we have for that coming month or quarter or segment that we're reporting at. Now we can disaggregate that even a little further as we go down in things, because we now have what we refer to as our generic performance objectives. And those are really areas that we're going to focus on to our customers, and of course it's got to be aligned with our strategic business plan. So when we look at those performance objectives, we've got those 5 that are sitting there. We've got cost, dependability, speed, flexibility, and quality. So when we look at those, you might say, well, I need all of those. And in fact, we are all of those. A good, I guess, a touchstone for us is to ask, excuse me, first ourselves, and also people within our organization, how do we compete with in the marketplace? Do we compete on cost? Do we compete on dependability? They've got the 5 choices. See what answer that people on the shop floor come back with, people on the front line of your organization come back with. And if we've decided that we're going to compete on one or two of these at the business strategy, and the answer coming back from the shop floor or from the frontline people is different, then our pyramid is misaligned, and that's not going to work out well for us. So it's something for us to absolutely keep in mind as we go through things. Now, taking this to the next step is that if we really combine or align our strategies, our business strategy to our operations strategy, and we've got our generic competitive objectives that we talk about, we can come up with a strategy that really is defined for us. And this slide, actually, I'm going to show it to you, I think 3, maybe 4 times today, because it's really a touchstone slide that we're going to come back to. So if we do this well, what is going to be the results? We're going to please our customers. We're going to counter our rivals. We're going to be able to be in a position to respond to market conditions, and we're going to secure a competitive advantage. Now, we could take that list and let's flip it the other way. And let's say if we don't align our strategy, our organization to achieve our business strategy, what will be the results? Well, we won't please our customers. Our rivals will beat us often and severely. We won't be in a position to respond to the market conditions, and we won't have a competitive advantage. And if you take that to the nth degree, ultimately, we just won't survive in the marketplace, and that's not why we're in business. So when you think about the strategy, another question to ask is, do we have a strategy? Or is our strategy sometimes, and particularly when we're a small company and we're trying to break out, is our strategy often becomes, go get the business, we'll figure out how to do it. And that's our strategy, and we'll get revenue that way, and that way we'll survive. And there's a rationale to that, because without revenue, you absolutely cannot survive. And that's of course why we're in business. We want revenue, we want profit margin, and we want to be able to provide wealth to the shareholders of the company, particularly if that is us as the owner of the company. Now, let's take this a little bit further and think about how we convert from a business strategy to our operations strategy and another influence that's associated with that. Because the next slide I want to show you here is another APIC slide, and it talks about the manufacturing environments. But before we talk about the various environments that we've got, we have to address what's referred to as the volume variety mix. And we need to know where we are so that we can support the manufacturing environment to support what our business strategy is. So what you'll notice here is that it tends to be that the lower the variety, the higher the volume, or vice versa. The higher the variety, the lower the volume. So for instance, as an example, if we're talking about ballpoint pens, there's not a lot of variety there. But the volume is high. The product is cheap. If you need a ballpoint pen, you just go down to Pens R Us or wherever you go, Staples, Costco, stationery store, and you go in there and they have a selection of pens. They have blue ones, they have black ones, they have click pens, they have cap pens, and you just take one of those. Those in that scenario product is going to be made to stock. The volume is high, the variety is relatively low. Now we can take the same pen, or not the same pen, but a pen, same product, and we can say, well, I want something that's very, very special, and I want something that is only going to be for me. Well, we can absolutely do that, and there are companies out there that will sell you a pen that will cost you thousands of dollars, that'll be a one-off, very low volume, as in one or just a small collection. Variety is going to be extremely high. So the materials that are being used, the shape, the balance, the weight, all those different things. But you can see that even the same product can fit in different places within that. Now, how do we tie our manufacturing environment to that? Well, if we're talking about a high variety and a low volume, we're going to have a manufacturing environment that we refer to as a project environment. Types of things that we would make in a project would be something like a one-off. It could be like the space shuttle, it could be a bridge or a building, or it could be an airplane, something like that. So that changes our environment. Now, as we go through these, if we get through the matrix here, of the volume variety. We've got a little bit less variety, but still low volume. We still have a lot of flexibility, and we're going to tend to work in an intermittent manufacturing job shop. Somewhere in the middle where we've got some variety, some volume, batch production. Moving down that continuum there, we've got into repetitive manufacturing, and then continuous production. And then that sort of thing, we're continuous production, we're looking at highly capital intensive facilities, 24/7 operations that are running, and they produce, think of like chemical plants, oil refineries, and the like that fall into that category. So when we look at the options that we have with regards to manufacturing environments, we can see that there's a lot of options, and it's critical that we align things with what our business strategy is. If our business strategy is go get the revenue and we'll figure out how to do it, you're going to be finding that with each order that you get, you're reassessing your manufacturing environment. If your manufacturing environment is very flexible, that's fine, but usually it's not. We're usually committed to one or the other. Now we don't have the best fit scenario of what our manufacturing environment is to what our business strategy is, and that will cause us problems. Going back, if we go back to here, to our balanced plans for pleasing the customer, counting the rivals and so forth, we're putting ourselves at a disadvantage to be able to catch that list in that box that's on the left-hand side there. So definitely we don't want to be able to, don't want to fall into that particular category. So let's just take a moment and talk about the competitive strategy performance objectives that we have, that we could compete on. So first of all, let's go through this slide here point by point. When it comes to quality, how we compete and the characteristics that we may relate to our competitive strategy. When the quality, it could be the level of design or the specification quality that we have when we're competing on that. Or it could be the percent of products or services that conform to those specifications. And that could be something that we compete on. Now, to a certain degree, quality is a given. We have to have quality. We can't be putting product out there, or we can only do it for so long and it's going to haunt us. But if we decide to compete on quality and use that as a competitive advantage, then this is where we would pursue things. Now, what about speed? A couple of, well, there's 3 examples here. We have how long does it take for us to respond to an inquiry, to a quotation? That may be something that, depending on the scenario, we may be able to do within minutes, or it may take a week or more, depending on what is there. But how are we going to set ourselves up so that we can compete as an objective, performance objective? What's the lead time from the time our customer places an order to the time we deliver it? Keeping in mind that from a customer's point of view, we look at it from a lead time and says, okay, we received the order on Monday, we shipped on Wednesday, so that was 3 days. Not real, that's not the customer's point of view. They may have noticed that they needed it on Friday, and that's when they start the clock ticking. And then we pick it up on Monday, we ship it on Wednesday, and we deliver on Friday. So in our mind, we've turned this around in 3 days. We think that's great, and that may well be. From a customer's point of view, though, they're looking at that and saying that took 7 days or 1 week to get to us. So we want to look at it not only from our point of view, but also from the customer's point of view. Also, how long does it take for us to respond to and to provide technical advice is another objective, performance objective. Dependability, the percent of on-time delivery of complete orders. Sometimes there's a performance measurement called DIFOT, delivered in full on time. Where do we sit if we're competing on dependability with that? Where do we rate? The percent of new product introductions that are on schedule. This is something that is being first to market is critical. The being able to be the leader and the perceived leader there. Expectations are created with regards to things that are coming out on time and so forth. Just the news this morning, Apple announced yesterday or this morning that their AirPods are going to be delayed. So they're monitoring that, and their response and the way they're positioning it is saying we're not going to release it until it's ready, and it's not ready, so we're holding off on the release of it. But that calls into question, though, when there's a delay, there is a downside with regards to that. Consistency of service and quality. We've all worked with other organizations, whether it's service or whether it's a manufacturing supplier that gives to us, that our experience with them varies from one time to another. That goes against dependability because we're not quite sure how our issue or our order is going to be addressed. Our fourth performance objective here is flexibility. So that could be in the range of features or sizes or coatings, various different settings that we may have and of what we can deliver to them, how fast we're entering new products and introducing those. What about the ability to change an order quantity, composition, and the timeline of an order? Are we going to compete on flexibility? If so, we need to be set up in order to do so. And then there's the cost. So that's what the price is for the product and service, the technical advice. Do we offer a list price and then provide discounts to various customers at times? Do we add to that or take away from that by offering payment terms that may be a little bit more lenient than others? So there's kind of an overview of those 5 performance objectives that we can use. So again, we need to decide which ones are right for us to use in these competitive strategies. Now, again, I'm showing you this slide. When we look at it and we review it, something you may not have noticed the first time I showed it to you is that it's broken down into 4, well, let's go through them first of all. We've got an overall low-cost provider strategy. We've got a focused low-cost strategy. We've got a broad differentiation strategy, focused differentiation strategy, and then we've got in the middle is kind of a hybrid version of that, our best cost provider. So what you'll notice there is that in one column there, the left column, we are focusing on cost and providing cost, and that's really how we're competing. We're competing on cost. Now, what you'll notice is that if we are able to differentiate ourselves, and that's our strategy to do so, cost becomes less of a deciding factor as to who people buy from. Because what happens is if we differentiate ourselves well enough, then people will say, well, yes, it costs more, but it's better, or but it's more aligned to what I want, and therefore you will win the business in that way. So we want to keep that in mind when we're developing our strategy and looking at it. And sometimes the other side of way of looking at it is looking at it from left to right, or in levels, sorry. Are we focusing to a broad group of people, or are we focused to a very narrow group of people? Because when we look at the cost versus differentiation, then broad versus narrow, then we've got these 4 different strategies plus the hybrid that's in the middle. So when we do that and we look at the different strategies, if we're looking at low cost provider strategy, then the performance objective that we're going to align with that in order to achieve it is going to be speed, and it's going to be cost. If we're differentiating ourselves, well, then we are making ourselves more flexible. We're working on being more dependable. We're focusing on quality and higher levels of quality specification. That being said, it makes it harder for us to compete when it comes to speed and definitely cost. We all recognize, just using it as an example, we all recognize that the way that Rolls-Royce Motor Cars positions itself, it does not position itself as being in every person's car. It doesn't position itself as being an affordable car. It positions itself as being different from all the others, right down to the hubcaps or the ceiling. If you go to their website and look at the way the car is designed and how the car is designed to cater to you, you can even have its GPS is geared in such a way that it knows where you're driving and can anticipate, the transmission can anticipate what is the best gear given your current speed and the hill or the decline that's coming up. So you're not going to get that for a low price. It's just not going to happen. And we understand that. But sometimes when it comes to our own organization, and we're thinking about how we're going to position ourselves in the marketplace, we forget about that. And the critical thing is having this business strategy that's in place, saying who are we, what are we looking at providing to our customer base. So that brings up a question though, because how do we decide what is the best strategy for us to use for our given organization? Well, we have to look at the scenario that we're in, and there's no answer that will apply to all companies. It's an assessment of where we are, what our capabilities are, where the marketplace is, and so forth. And we use a tool that's called the 5 Forces analysis. And we're going to focus in on the first, the center box there. In any given marketplace, there's rivalry between the sellers. We have pressures that come from them. Our competitors, as worthy as they are looking to get a better market position because they're trying to do the same thing as we are. They're trying to execute a well thought out, well-founded business strategy and to provide wealth to the shareholders of their organization. So they're constantly looking to get a better market position. They're constantly looking to increase their sales. They're looking to take more market share, particularly if the market has stopped growing. If the market itself has stopped growing, the only way they can increase sales is to take sales from their competitors, which includes you. And they're looking to have a competitive advantage in order to be able to achieve that. But now that's just there all the time, and that's taking place and causes us to lie awake at night sometimes thinking about how we're going to position ourselves and how we're going to reassess the marketplace. But there's other things that have come into play as well. Let's take a look at the potential for new entrants. So we look at our marketplace right now. We've got competitor A and B in there, and we're constantly bidding against them. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. But then something can come along that upsets the whole apple cart for us. What happens if a new company comes into that marketplace? What is the threat of that happening? When you think about it, it can happen in any industry. For instance, Honda has made a good name and a reputation for themselves based on gasoline engines. So at one point they looked at it and they said, we should go into the lawnmower industry. We should go into the ATV industry. They just got into, in the last few years of release, that they just got into the jet airplane industry, and they started selling small corporate jets. So that is a game changer for companies that are in each of those particular marketplaces. They may not have thought that a few years ago. Research in Motion 10 years ago, 2007 or 2006, the year before 07. Did they think that there was going to be a game changer that would come along? They owned the world when it came to smartphones with the BlackBerry. Then all of a sudden, Apple comes out and says, hey, we've got an iPod. We decided to put a phone into it as well. And at first, their reaction was, people are never going to want to give up the tactile keyboard. They're going to want that. I think we're safe. Well, very, very quickly, it became evident that they were not. So that can be a game changer. We need to be constantly aware of what's happening in our marketplace with the potential for new entrants to come in. Let's take a look at the next area. Oops, I went the wrong way. Looking at firms in other industries offering substitutes. So what could happen is we're trying, and so are our competitors, trying to get a customer's business. What happens if they decide to go out of our market and use something else instead? And that can happen in a number of different ways. An example I thought of is how the newspaper industry has been turned on its head over the last 5-10 years. More and more people are getting their news not from the newspaper, a tactile paper, but getting it more from the internet, from their smartphones, and that changes their whole business model. And they've reacted to that by coming up with an electronic edition of the paper and asking people to continue to subscribe and so forth. But they've had to reassess what's happening there. The third area could be with regards to the suppliers to us of the raw materials, their parts, components, resource inputs, and so forth. So it could, what is our, the most obvious thing is, what is our bargaining position with them? Do we have the upper hand, or are we a little bit at mercy of that particular supplier, perhaps because they're the sole supplier or they're the single supplier that is available to us at this particular time. That changes our ability to be able to negotiate terms and prices and so forth. And that's one threat. But what about if our supplier decides to become our competitor? This is certainly going to change our business strategy and an environment. It causes us to reassess our business strategy. You think, well, that won't happen. Well, it does happen. Goodyear and Bridgestone decided to start selling tires through their own stores. So if you were selling tires and you thought that Bridgestone wasn't going to be a competitor of Goodyear, they went out and actually became the competitor to these particular retail locations and so forth. So that can be something that can cause us, again, to lie awake at night as to how we're going to address that. You think about also, too, if you're a distributor of, say, Apple products, there's the Apple stores. So Apple is in direct competition to you for you selling the Apple products in that particular case. So that's the fourth of the five force analysis. The other is with regards to buyers. Again, do we have the upper hand, or do the buyers, our customers, have the upper hand when it comes to that? What about if the buyer, our customer, decides to become vertically integrated and starts to manufacture the product that we sell and manufacture for them? If they decide to do that themselves, well, that's certainly going to be a game changer. So we want to be able to take a look at what our marketplace is, the external analysis of what the marketplace is in these 5 areas, so that we're aware of it and we don't get caught off guard by changes that happen in the marketplace, or that we're at least prepared for it and we can be ready to position ourselves accordingly. So those are just a few things that happen with regards to the 5 force analysis. Other things that are in this list here, internet applications. That's certainly changed the travel industry in the last number of years. Banking as well. The way that people are buying through organizations like Amazon and so forth. There's other things. There's globalization. There's long-term growth rates. There's product innovation. Technology changes and makes what seemed impossible just a year or 2 ago now possible as technology is being adopted. What happens if there's an entry or an exit of a major firm? How that changes the landscape that we're competing in. Cost and efficiency that can take place there. Differentiated products and services. What if a product comes along that's so different that it changes everything? Let's go back in time, maybe 15 years or so ago. Apple came out with the iPod. It was not the first digital music player. There were already music players out there, but their product was differentiated. And very, very quickly, I noticed on websites like Best Buy and so forth, they had MP3 players, and then they had a segment for iPod. Because although it was just a music player, it was it differentiated itself that it was being positioned by the retail stores as an entirely different product, and in turn, its own marketplace. And we see that that's done very well for them. Regulatory influences can come along and cause change. For good or for bad for us on the landscape is the things that happen. One example I use when I'm teaching is regulatory influence that came out a few years ago when BC came out with a law that said you can't have a handheld device while you're driving your car. Well, that drastically was great for companies like Jawbone and so forth for Bluetooth headsets. That changed the landscape in a very positive way. But they had to realize and understand too about the product life cycle of that, because as people are trading in their cars, they're buying cars now that already have Bluetooth technology in the cars already. So while they had a great climb, they had to realize and come to terms with the fact that it was going to be a declining market in a short period of time, and they had to understand that, the landscape and how they have their business strategy. And again, there's companies that have positioned themselves to take that technology and use it in other ways. So they're very, very smart and focused on what they're doing. Changing societal concerns. attitudes and lifestyles. So when we look back at this particular slide again, which is right at the beginning that we looked at, we've got our business strategy, we've got our operation strategy that is aligned, and we've selected which of the generic performance objectives that we're going to use to help us to achieve the business strategy. So if we don't have a good business strategy which defines our operation strategy, if we don't have that, what's going to happen is we're going to be fragmented, we're going to be inefficient, and we're not going to have a competitive advantage, which is going to be to our detriment. So we certainly don't want to have that happen to us. We don't mind it happening to our competitors, but we don't want it happening to us. So once again, we're back to the slide. So we've got our balanced plan for pleasing our customers, for countering rivals. We're responding to the market conditions as things change. And we're securing our competitive advantage. So at this point in our presentation, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at each of these 5 competitive strategies, and I've provided an example for each of them that we can take a look at and see some of the decisions that they've made and how they've aligned. And like I said, the takeaway that we have here is that from today's presentation is that our business strategy, our operations strategy, and how we compete in the marketplace must all be facing the same direction. They must be aligned. So with that in mind, excuse me, let's take a look at the first of these, which is the low-cost provider strategy. So for a company that is competing on this strategy, they've got to maintain a high-value supply chain efficiency. They've got to lower their costs and constantly be looking at that. They've got to maintain a low price, but it doesn't mean to say that they're going to be frills-free in the products or the services that they offer. They're looking to underprice their competitors to increase total profits and achieve a lasting strategic competency that rivals find hard to match. So the organization that I thought that right now is displaying this good example of this is Allegiant Air. And in talking with some people over the last little bit, I've never flown Allegiant Air, my daughter has. But in talking to other people, it seems that Allegiant Air is the airline everybody loves to hate, but people are still flying it nonetheless. One of the things that comes into play with regards to Allegiant is that who their customer or target customer is. In my role here at Essential, I'm traveling a lot. I'm not a fit for this particular, when it comes to traveling. I'm not a fit for this particular airline just because of their schedule, because of the way they approach business and so forth. That being said, their real target customer is not me or somebody like me. Their target customer is leisure and discretionary customers. They're focusing on trying to get people who are thinking, you know what, why don't we drive, get in the car and we'll drive somewhere. But now the Allegiant's coming along and pricing themselves so low that you kind of look at it and you go, well, why would we drive when we can fly? And that's really the target that they're looking for. With regards to who they're looking to have. Now, that could be me on my off time. I had a neighbor who used to go on their website all the time. They had a house in Phoenix, and she would, every 6 months to the day they release the next day, she'd log on at 9 o'clock at night, because that's midnight back east, grab a $69 flight to Phoenix from Bellingham. And she said it's as uncomfortable as anything, but in 2.5 hours, I'm there, and it's, 69 US. So she was happy about that. So let's take a look at the strategy. Well, obviously, as we've talked about, a low-cost provider strategy has to be focused on low cost in their supply chain as to what they're doing. So they're looking to reduce their costs. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. One of the things that they do is they do fees for everything. And we'll talk about that again in a minute as well. They have frills, but they're not free frills. They are going to charge you for those things. They also have widened their revenue stream by selling third-party services such as hotel stays. So apparently if you go onto their website, you book your flight, then they're saying, hey, would you like, seems to me you're going to need a place to stay. Can we book it for you? Car rentals and the like. So let's take a look just for a moment and focus in on the low cost. So how do they lower their costs? Because you're thinking, if you're like me, you're thinking they're in the airline industry. This is not a cheap industry to be in. Well, here's what one of the things they do. If you've ever flown Allegiant, they fly out of Bellingham. They don't fly out of Vancouver. So they're in a smaller city. If you've been to the Bellingham airport, you know that it's just a couple of gates. The last time I was there was an ATCO trailer, and they got a security gate there and so forth. But when they serve these smaller cities, they're not paying the landing fees that their competitors are in other areas, such as Vancouver or SeaTac, just to name the two larger airports that are real close. They also keep their costs low by renting the counters that they have by the hour, not owning them. So that keeps their costs down. Another way that they keep their costs low is by buying older planes. If you're much of a plane nut, you'll notice that that's an old MD-80. Their average fleet, the average age of their fleet is 22 years. So the planes are still viable, but they're definitely not new, and they're probably showing some wear and tear. But here's the benefit to that. It costs them $3 to $4 million for a plane. And that's a huge thing in keeping their costs low, because for if you were to buy a 737 brand new, you're $50 million and up. So that's 12 times as much. So that changes their whole approach. If WestJet or Air Canada spends $50 million on a plane, let's say they're paying it off over 10 years, that's $5 million a year or $100,000 a week. They're paying to pay off that plane. There's the old truckers term, if your wheels aren't turning, you ain't earning. So if that plane's not in the air, it's not generating revenue, and it must, because it's costing them $100,000 a week to have that, in that scenario, to have that plane there. So there's a lot of pressure on them to get that plane up in the air, to get people into the seats. With Allegiant, because it only costs them $4 million, and on average they pay for the plane completely in 18 months, that if they can't send it onto a profitable route, they just let it sit on the ground, because there's minimal fixed costs that are associated with that. Another way that they do that, we talked about it not being frills free. You can get things on the plane, but they charge you for everything. They'll charge you for a carry-on. They'll charge you for a check bag. If you'd like a blanket, that's going to cost you. They will give you an electronic boarding pass. If you want one in paper, it will cost you, I believe, $5 per boarding pass. So they're increasing their revenue. They got a low price point to get you there, but if you want extras, these frills, then it is going to cost you. Something else that they do is that they've set up their routes in such a way so that the flight crews return to their home base at the end of every day. And that means that they don't have to pay for hotels for them, and that lowers their costs. They've also done something that we refer to as disintermediation. They've created direct relationships with hotels. So disintermediation basically means cutting out the middleman. So what happens is they're making more on every booking that they make at the hotels, so as to be able to increase their revenue and make it profitable. Now, here's what's interesting that I thought about Allegiant is that in 2014 and in 2015, that's the most recent numbers that I have got, Allegiant is the world's most profitable by percent airline in the world. So while people love to hate them, they are a successful organization. They have a business model that works. They have a strategy and operations and performance objectives that are aligned. And for that, they are rewarded by being the most profitable airline in the world. Let's change our subject a little bit now, and let's talk about broad differentiation strategy. So the features or the facets of this is that product and services attributes lower the buyer's cost of using it. Buyers are attracted to intangible features of the product. So just talking about that is, have you ever found yourself paying more than for something than you could get a cheaper version of elsewhere, but you want to pay it? There's something intangible about it that you say, I'll pay the extra price. I want it. Which leads us into the third bullet point there, which is the price premium is greater than the cost to differentiate. So yes, it costs me more. It costs me twice as much, half as much. but I still want it. I still perceive a value to be equation to be there. And their strategic capabilities are hard to match. So the organization that I've selected for that is, of course, Apple. And what I thought was interesting is that when you look at who their target customer is, I put there everyone. And I'm not just trying to push Apple or anything like that. Their focus is they want to get their products in the hands of everybody. I've got a quote here from Tim Cook that was taken earlier this year. It'll come up in a minute. But here's how he sees, as the business strategy, sees the marketplace for Apple. Now, I know they just came out with their latest quarterly earnings, and they're a little bit lower and so forth. But this is a comment that he made on August 13th of this year in a Washington Post interview. He said, think about it. And this is how he perceives the potential for growth or the size of the market. Families have a TV. Some families are fortunate enough to have multiple TVs. But if you look at all the TVs in the world, it's not going to be one-to-one. And it's not one-to-one, and it's not going to be one-to-one. So basically what he's saying is we could be a couple with 2 kids might have 2 TVs. But the goal of Apple is that they want that family to have 4 iPhones, 4 iPads, and so forth. And that's where he sees with regards to the growth in the marketplace. And that's their assessment of it. Now, what is Apple's strategy? Well, it's an easy one to really pick out and to look at. Its emphasis is on elegant design. We see that when we pick it up, we hold it right down to their packaging. It's a bright, shiny object, and as humans, we tend to be attracted to that. It's user-friendly. People just find that product is easier to use. It's a little more intuitive. It's kind of almost anticipating what you want to do next. That's there. High-end branding, absolutely. It's the iPhone of iPhones, basically, that is out there. There are other products out there. Some of them very, very good. Their marketplace has changed in the last few weeks because one of the major competitors had to do a worldwide recall. That has changed things for them, the landscape drastically. And product innovation, we could argue that that's kind of waned off a little bit in more recent times, but definitely it has been there at times, and remains to be seen what will happen in the future. What I thought was interesting is another comment from Tim Cook, because it goes back to that point there that buyers are attracted to intangible features of the product and service. And this really drives home that when you differentiate yourself well, you totally squash the cost part of the equation as to what it costs. And look at this comment. This is from Bloomberg Businessweek interview with Tim Cook. We never had an objective to sell a low-cost phone. Yeah, no kidding. I think it's $1,300 for a new iPhone 7 now, 7 Plus with 256 gig of memory. Our primary objective is to sell a great phone and provide a great experience, and we figured out a way to do it at a lower cost. And they have been successful in doing that. The largest company in the world when it comes to that. What's interesting too is that Apple earns 94% of the worldwide profits for smartphone sales. So there's not 94% of the sales, but of the profits made worldwide on smartphone sales, 94% of it goes to Apple. And when you add it, you've got your other competitors like Samsung and so forth. What I found in preparing for this presentation, a lot of them, of the smartphone manufacturers, are actually losing money. So when you equate that out of the sales, then that's why their growth is even higher. So they're very, very successful at what they're doing. All right, let's have a look at our hybrid option here. So this is a low-cost approach to offering differentiated products and services. We've got upscale attributes are incorporated using strategic advantage of lower cost production than the rivals. Product or service is significantly better than low-cost version. And price is significantly lower than higher price differentiated alternatives. Now, the organization I decided to use as an example here is known to all of us. It's Costco. So now taking a look at what their strategy is, and we're probably all familiar with them, is they have a membership, a subscription service. So in order to shop at Costco, you need to pay a membership fee, and in order to get in the door and be able to pay for the merchandise that you want. Uh, that being said, that allows them to still remain competitive and successful, but they cap margins. They have some loss leaders, as well as another part of their strategy is that they pay above industry average wage package that they have. They also limit the SKUs that they have in any given store at any given time as well. So let's take a look at this. First of all, in order for their membership to work, and if you have a Costco membership, you're faced with this every year, is it's time to renew again, and you have to pay X number of dollars again. What's interesting is that the renewal rate in North America for Costco and the membership is 91%. So that means that they must be feeling like there's a value equation in there for people to renew each time, and that they're getting that money and more back. We have margins that are average about 10.6%. I make reference there to a jeans story, and I want to just quickly review this with you because it really drives home the point that they have a strategy and that they adhered to it. So what happened was, this is a Costco buyer in the United States was able to purchase a large quantity of high name brand name jeans at a really good price. So they were selling the jeans for $29.99 in the stores, in the Costco stores. At the same time, the department stores were selling the same jeans for $50. Now, it came time for them to renegotiate the next batch or delivery of shipments over there, and the buyer was able to negotiate the jeans for $7 less. So what that meant was they said, well, let's just keep it at $29.99, and we'll make an extra $7. Well, think about it. It wouldn't take a lot for a Costco store to sell 1,000 pairs of jeans, say in a month. That would be, at $7 extra profit, that would be $700,000 extra dollars in profit. It would drive into that very, very fast. Now, here's where it comes into the strategy, because in order to provide the value, the concept is that we negotiate a better price, and then we pass that on to you, and we still make our 10.6%. So the idea of rejecting this extra perceived profit was rejected, and the price dropped to $22.99. And then that they adhered to the strategy that they had defined, and made sure that their operations followed through on that. We also see that there's loss leaders that Costco has. You may or may not even be aware of that. First of all, we've got the hot dog and the pop. If you go there, it's $1.50. It's $1.50 Canadian. It's $1.50 US. Has been for years and years and years. The price has never changed. What you may not have been aware of is that the rotisserie chickens that they sell at Costco, Costco makes 20 cents a chicken on it. So that is definitely a loss leader. I mean, when you consider what your overhead costs are going to be, it's going to be costing them more than 20 cents. So why would they do that? Well, if you look at where the rotisserie chickens are placed in the store, you have to go all the way through the other areas, the areas with the jewelry case, the areas with the TV, the areas with the jeans, the areas with everything else, to get to the back where you pick up the chicken. And the hope is that on the way back to the chickens, on the way back to the counter cashier to pay for it, you will pick up other products as well. And I think we've all fallen into that category where we run into Costco for something, to grab a few things, and we cash out, and it's literally hundreds of dollars. But yet we perceive the value. We're going to buy it anyway. So they were able to garner the business that way. The other thing that they do is that they, the wage package, they pay more than the competitors do. And you may say, well, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you keep your costs down? Well, what they found is that because they pay a little bit more, especially when you factor in things like the hourly wage, health benefits, 401k matching that they have in the United States and so forth, that reduces the turnover of people. And when they do that, it means that there's a more consistent process and service to the customer. The customer is happier, and it actually saves them money paying out a little bit more there. And then also, because they have less SKUs, the stock keeping units, that increases their purchasing power, and it also means there's less competition for the supplier. So they have a really good strategy they put in place. Now, how successful is it? Well, we know Costco is successful. As of 2015, they were the second largest retailer in the world after Walmart. So they are successful in what they're doing. Okay, let's take a look at our fourth area here, which is focus low-cost strategy. So we're targeting a niche market. It might be a geographical area or a type of customer. The customer has well-defined needs. They know what they want. The focus is on lowest cost overall, and they reconfigure the value chain to reduce the costs. So the next slide here, I'm just going to kind of show you. We're going to talk about the winery industry. This, for me, is one of my favorite wineries. It's down in the Silverado Trail on the east side of the Napa Valley. It's called Dariouche. And when you look at that photo there, that's just the visitor center that's out, a photo I took from the outside. You can tell that this is not going to be a cheap place. When you look at the opening gates, if you have an opportunity to go to dariouche.com, you'll see it. When you look inside, this is the interior of the visitor center. You can see that they have spent a lot of money. This is a high-end estate winery. Tastings there range, if you want a flight of 5 wines of like 1 ounce servings, will cost you $40 US per person. Other tastings that you can go to will cost you up to $300 a person. We're not going to talk about this particular winery more than what we've talked about here, because at the other end of the scale, we're going to talk about this winery. It too is based in Northern California. It's called Bronco Winery, and it was started in 1973 by Fred and John Franzia. They are actually brothers and cousins, a family-owned winery. I think it says that somewhere on there. Excuse me for a second. My apologies, I'm just getting over a cold. The Bronco stands for brothers and cousins. That's where the word Bronco Winery comes from. They sell in over 60 countries. I'm sorry, 90 countries. They've got California brands, they've got national brands, and so forth. You may not have heard of Bronco, but you probably heard of some of the products that they sell, because I forget how many different labels they have, but it's up there. I think 120 different labels. So the next slide here, when you look at it, you see Charles Shaw Wine. Bronco Wine Company is the 5th largest wine producer in the United States. They are the largest vineyard in the United States. They bottle 20 million cases a year. They have over 60 brands. The capacity they have is 230 liters of wine a year. So when you convert that to 750 mil, that's basically 250 million bottles a year. Now, Charles Shaw, you might have heard of. You might have heard of 2 Buck Chuck. That's this particular product that's here, sold through Trader Joe's, and they sell literally for $3. It used to be 2 Buck Chuck because it was $1.99. Prices have gone up. But think about it. If we've got a low price product like this that sells for $36 US a case, you have to have low cost. Your chain has to find ways to lower costs. So let's just compare some costs between Napa and in San Joaquin, where Bronco is now based, although they do have wineries in Napa and they have a bottling plant there. But costs in Napa, if you were to buy land, it will cost in Napa Valley, it will cost you $350,000 an acre. So Dariouche, I just showed you there, they have 90 acres. That's $32 million in land costs alone they have to go through. If you want to buy grapes by the ton from Napa Valley, it's going to cost you $2,600 a ton. And the average batch size, just for comparison, when they make a batch of wine, they're talking there, it's really is a boutique winery type thing. On average, it's going to be about 700 gallons. Now, out in San Joaquin, where primarily Bronco is based, land out there will cost you $10,000 an acre. If you buy grapes from out there, it's going to cost you $600 a ton. And the batch size that Bronco has, and this is where they've adjusted their supply chain and how they're producing to have economies and scale, is average batch size is 700,000 gallons. Now, an Olympic-sized swimming pool holds 660,000 gallons. So you can definitely see the economies and scale that they have there. Franzio, who started, he grew up in Napa. He went to school with the Sebastiani boys, the Mondavi families, and so forth. He knows them all, but he has taken an entirely different approach to winemaking. Now, how does he have his operational strategy support his business strategy? Because he's not going for the high-end wine buyer. He's going for somebody who wants a $3 bottle of wine. So one of the ways that he does this is he does it by means of vertical integration, from the vineyard to the table. He grows the grapes. His organization crushes the grapes. They bottle it. They store the bottles, and they're also involved in distribution. Even down the company that provided the porta potties for the grape pickers put their price up, and he fired them, and he created his own business that does that. He's vertically integrated wherever possible. Now, because of how he's created a strategy, he doesn't have some things that Dariush or Mondavi, excuse me, does have. He doesn't have an architectural winery visitor center. In fact, his office is in an Atco trailer. Apparently there's duct tape on the tears in the carpet. He's not spending a lot of money there. He doesn't have a publicist. He doesn't provide tours, and he doesn't have to worry about having FaceTime with customers like the other ones do. So what he does is he reduces costs. So how do you reduce costs so much so that you can sell for a profit a $3 bottle of wine? Well, he's a few tricks he has up his sleeve. He buys grapes when there's a glut. So in other words, supply and demand. When there's greater supply and less demand, he goes in and he gets it for a better price. Likewise, when wineries go into foreclosure, they're not in a position to demand a high cost. He grabs it, and by assimilation or attrition, he's been able to get rid of, enlarge the vineyards that he grows from. Something he does on the tactical side is what I refer to as the vine orientation. Any vineyard that he plants, the vines are always running north to south. And the rationale behind that is that gives an even amount of sunshine and heat and warmth and so forth to all the grapes that are on the vine. In addition to that, when he runs the vines, the lengths, he makes them long and straight paths. The thought being that when you put farm equipment and so forth up and down there, every time you turn a tractor around or a trailer or a piece of equipment, turn around, that creates wear and tear. So by having longer lines, there's less turns, the equipment lasts longer. Everything he does is focused on reducing the cost. And that makes sense because he is has a focused low cost strategy. Let's talk about the last area here, which is the focused differentiation strategy. So what are the features of this particular strategy? Well, we differentiate ourselves to a niche market. It's a specific customer or geographic area that's involved here. We meet the unique buyer needs for a special product and service attributes or seller capabilities. Companies often target customers willing to pay a premium for a product or a service. So the company that I've chosen here as an example is Rolex watches or timepieces. Something that I found interesting is that Rolex was started in London, not in Geneva. They are in London. It was in 1905, so they're only a 111-year-old company. I would have thought they were older than that. I'm sorry, I thought I'd shown you that graphic there. Excuse me. Now, what's interesting is in 1905, people didn't like to wear wristwatches because they were highly inaccurate. People wore a pocket watch. So you think about a pocket watch and a three-piece vest, people would hold those. And they were the first company to be, in 1910, to be awarded a timing certificate for a wristwatch. And that was in 1910. Now, timing is everything, because 1910 is just 4 years before World War I. And what happened was there became a much higher demand for people who wanted to wear a wristwatch instead of a pocket watch, because it was way easier to be able to look at a wristwatch than a pocket watch when you were in a trench. And a lot of World War I was trench warfare. Same thing is if you're trying to fly a plane. If you're trying to point a rifle, having a wristwatch was much easier than having a pocket watch. But they've also stayed ahead of the curve as time has gone by, and they've added features like it being waterproof, a self-winding mechanism, telling you the date and the day and the date on the timepiece as well. So who is Rolex's target customer? Well, they're looking for people who have the desire and the ability to purchase a watch that is going to cost them from $7,500 to $100,000 or more. Now, why would you buy a Rolex then? If you were to say, hey, you want a watch that's going to cost you $10,000, we'd probably say no. But why do people buy a watch? Well, often they buy it as a milestone in their life. They're getting married, they're graduating, they got a promotion, and they will award themselves a luxury timepiece like Rolex. Other reasons is that when we go to celebrate a milestone in our lives, we could get an iPad, we could get a bunch of other things that we may do, but the problem with those is they don't tend to be relevant over the long term. They can be functional, but a Rolex is relevant. We need to know the time. We need to focus on, it may be the only piece of jewelry that a man or a woman may wear. So the wrist real estate is critical. But a Rolex people tend to buy with a view to handing it down. So that might be a reason for buying a Rolex. It may be because there's a status that is associated with it, or not. Why would we not buy a Rolex? Well, the question comes up, do we need a watch? Given that we've got iPhones and other ways of being able to tell the watch. And the question is, well, why do we have to buy a mechanical watch when a quartz one will do? Interestingly, in doing research for this, I didn't know, but in the 1980s, Rolex came out with quartz watches for a while. But then they abruptly stopped and focused back on their strategy and went back to focus solely on mechanical timepieces. Rolex is banking on two things. People always need to know what time it is, and the wrist remains prime real estate to show something off, so people will have that. So now let's take a look at their strategy and how they align things with regards to that. They have a complete focus on quality. Every step that they take, they're focused on making the watch better and better and better, regardless of what it costs to get it to that. So that is their strategy, if you were to sum it up. They are vertically integrated. Everything but the crystal sapphire, which you look through to look at the watch, and the hands on the watch. They make everything else. So there's no sacrifices in what they do. They can make it any way they want. They do use robots and have some robotic assembly, but by and large, a Rolex timepiece is assembled by hand. They will only use a robot if the robot is capable of doing the task better than a human, but never using a robot just to speed things up, because if a human can do it better, then they get that task is assigned to them. And the other thing that I found surprising was the amount of time that they spend on R&D. They have an R&D lab that is focused just on developing new watches. They have an R&D lab devoted to improving the techniques used in manufacturing. They have a chemistry lab that develops and researches oils and lubricants for the machines that they use to make the watch. They also have labs that do stress tests on the watch movement, the bracelet, the cases, everything that is associated with it. The other thing that they do as part of their strategy is they have actually started training a workforce to maintain and repair the timepieces, so that the timepieces can be looked after. Remember, this is the longevity of a watch. A watch can be handed down one, maybe two generations. So there's got to be somebody that is able to repair it and maintain the watches. One aspect I wanted to focus on here is something that Rolex came up with about 20 years ago. Is when they make a stainless steel watch, they use a product or type of steel called 904L stainless steel, and this is a differentiator from them. As you can see from the photo, the case is one solid piece of stainless steel that is machined down. And a lot of their competitors will buy the case from somebody else. Rolex makes it themselves. Now, why do they want to use 904L stainless steel? Because it's more rust and corrosion resistant. That being said, it's harder to work with, which is why a lot of their competitors don't work with it. But the benefit of it is that it takes and holds a polish longer than other stainless steel does. But in order to do that, and they could do this because they're vertically integrated, they had to go out and get new machines in order to work with the 904L stainless steel. So they being vertically integrated and adhering to their strategy put them in a position to be able to create a differentiated product that they're able to sell in the marketplace. Now, how long does it take to make a Rolex timepiece? It can take up to a year. And what I found fascinating is that Rolex makes between 800,000 and 1 million timepieces a year. And are they successful at doing this? Once again, by far the majority of profits that are being made in the luxury timepiece market is made by Rolex, and they're probably the most successful. There are more expensive watches out there. You could say that there are even better watches out there and timepieces out there. They are probably the most, arguably the most successful at what they do. So let's take a look here at our slide that we have. We've got a competitive strategy. We've got our business strategy. We've got our operational strategy. We've got our competitive, strategic, objectives that we have. When we align them, we put ourselves in a position where we have a balanced plan for pleasing our customers. We're able to counter our rivals. We're able to respond to market conditions, and we're able to secure a competitive advantage. So when we looked at overall low cost, we quickly reviewed Allegiant Air and seeing how they do what they do and do it so well. For broad differentiation strategy, we reviewed how Apple has positioned the iPhone among other products in the marketplace and is being successful there. We talked about best cost provider strategy, or the hybrid strategy of Costco Wholesale, about how they use that competitive strategy to their advantage. Bronco Wineries, focused low cost strategy, and then Rolex as timepieces as a focused differentiation strategy. So what you're going to find is that we've got these as generic competitive strategies. You may find that your organization fits into one of these and you can leverage this information in that particular direction, or it may be a bit of a blend of it. But regardless, what we want to do is we want to come up with a business strategy that is based on an assessment of the marketplace, looking at our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, external environment, internal environment, what we're capable of doing, defining that strategy, aligning our operations strategy to that, and focusing on the competitive objectives that we have that we can utilize in our production of and delivery of services. So those are the slides that I have for you to review. I'll hand it back to Mike and see if there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Brett. I'm still taking a breath having listened to that presentation of, wow, you went through a lot of material and really focused at the business strategy level more than at the manufacturing level. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Are there any questions from our audience? I noticed a few people had to drop off at just before 2 o'clock due to other scheduling and whatnot. If you do have any questions, you're welcome to contact Brett. I noticed you don't have your contact information.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to push the button.
There we go.
There you go.
With his email address in the top right-hand corner of the screen. So again, Brett, thank you so very much for the presentation, and everyone in the audience, thank you for your time. If you have questions, reach out to Brett. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.